Professor Sir John Curtice, pollster and Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, joins me now to discuss the latest numbers. Professor, lovely to see you. You've been saying today that there's more chance of lightning striking twice than a Tory victory for Rishi Sunak. Is that definitely right? No? Qualify that then. Right. What did you actually say? Go on.
Right. It's really a repetition of what I've said before about there being a 99% chance of Keir Starmer being the next Prime Minister. So what I was saying is lightning would have to strike twice for Mr. Sunak to retain the position of Prime Minister, which is not quite the same thing as saying Labour would need to win the election, because you have to bear in mind that even if we were to get a dramatic closure in the polls, and as a result, the Conservative Party ends up being the larger party in a hung parliament, that would still not ensure that Mr. Sunak was Prime Minister because of the lack of potential coalition allies. You've got to put the two things together.
Fair enough. What is the chance at the moment of a hung parliament? None of the polls seem to be pointing to that at all.
No. I mean that in itself is extremely remote. So at the moment, if you've just taken the consequence of the most recent regular poll, 19-point Labour lead. The worst error in the polls is historically is about 9 points. Add to that what would now, with what would constitute a pretty dramatic narrowing of the polls for just the last couple of days. Let's take another 4 off that lead. Well, we're still looking at a 6-point Labour lead. That would potentially put us into hung parliament territory. But I'm now taking two very, very strong assumptions. But even with only a 6-point Labour lead, Mr. Sunak does not remain Prime Minister, because he will not be doing well enough to be able to get past the 326 mark, which effectively the Conservatives have to do. Labour don't.
Okay. And when we're...
all of that said, I mean, there's the first of what will doubtless be a forest of these so-called MRP mega polls from Survation. They're saying it's over a 90% chance that Labour will get more than they did under Tony Blair in 1997. And the Conservatives are being hard-pressed by Liberal Democrats to remain the second largest party. So that's arguably another forecast at the other end of the spectrum.
I mean, these MRP polls, are they to be believed, John? Are they to be taken with a pinch of salt? We've had some predicting just 50 seats for the Conservatives, others predicting more than 150, which seems to me to be a wide variance. What should the public make of it all?
Well, actually, the highest is 155, not much more than that. The truth is they should be taken notice of, but not necessarily all of them believed. There is a crucial similarity between them, and then there is an underlying difference. The crucial similarity, and it's the reason why all of them are pointing to the Conservatives heading for a pretty low number of seats, is that they're all finding that the Conservative vote is falling most heavily in places where they were previously strongest. Yes. That is a pattern that is arithmetically partly inevitable, because the scale of the Conservative loss is such that there's about 100 constituencies where they cannot lose by as much as the national polls are pointing to. It's also because the Brexit Party did not fight Conservative constituencies in 2019. So anything that reform getting Conservative-held constituencies is going to be a plus on 0. What they disagree about, however, is the extent to which the Conservative support will fall more heavily in the places where they were previously strongest. And I think this is, in fact, the biggest uncertainty about the election. So you're right, it could be between 50 and 150. We don't know where it will lie within that range, but that does look like the range within which it is likely to lie. And any figure within that range would represent the worst Conservative result in its history.
Could shy conservatism have been underestimated in the vein of 1992, Professor? I mean, could it be higher than...
1992 was not caused by shy stories. 1992, like 2015, was caused by the much boring explanation, which is that there were simply too many Labour voters in the polls. That said, what is true is, and it's still true, that about 9% or so of 2019 Conservative voters are saying that they're undecided. That number does now seem to be falling, as we would expect, as we're getting towards polling day, but it's still twice the proportion of 2019 Labour voters are saying they're undecided. Now, even if you assume that all of those 2019 Conservative voters actually go back to the Conservatives, but then make the same assumption for Labour, you're only going to knock about 3 or 4 points off the Labour lead at most. So, yes, one of the reasons why in the end the polls might somewhat overestimate the Labour position is because of the undecideds, which you might want to call shy Tories.
Yes.
But it's not enough to change the big headline, which is the Conservatives are a very long way behind.
And what's your prediction for kind of the big theme of the night? Obviously, we've already seen all of the polling which suggests that a Labour government is almost an inevitability. The scale of the Tory defeat, we don't quite know it yet, but we think it's going to be very large. Is it going to be the falling of these big Tory beasts? Is that going to be the story of the night, successive Portillo moments?
Yes, I think it's going to be exactly like 1997. I mean, if indeed the polls are at all right, we are going to see a number of cabinet ministers lose their seats. And I guess the seat that, if it were to go, that would be the nearest equivalent to 1997 would be Penny Mordaunt, because Penny Mordaunt is probably at the moment the lead centrist candidate for the Conservative leadership contest that will probably ensue after this election, in much the same way as Michael Portillo occupied a similar position back in 1997. That was, that's the one big beast who we might anticipate will stand, who is most clearly at risk.
All right, Professor Sir John Curtice, thank you very much indeed for your experience and wisdom this evening. Lovely to speak to you.